Testing the microphone. Does that sound good? The microphone? All right. Hey, there we go. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. I think everyone in this room has met me already, but I'm Grant. My wife and I are here from sunny South Florida, but lately it's been rainy South Florida, but that's a par for the course. But we are happy to be here, and we are pleased and honored, and we thank you for having us. She is upstairs with the kids right now, I believe. But for class today, we have something that I think is a very pertinent thing to talk about in this day and age, in a time where people are viewing their life as sort of a journey that they're going on to figure themselves out and learn how to be true to themselves. And while there is a good side to that idea, that you need to learn and know and understand yourself and things that you care about, things that are on your priority list and all of that, and it leads to a good life if you can live in line with it. We also need to understand that Christ never taught anybody to, quote, find themselves. You know what I mean? He never told anybody, I want you to go out on a journey and figure yourself out. Figure yourself out, then you will become closer to God. He never taught anything like that. But that's a prevailing thought today, that I'm trying to figure myself out. I'm trying to find myself. And if I find myself, then I'm going to be spiritually closer to God, spiritually closer to Christ, and learn some deeper truth. If only I find myself and be true to myself. But Christ never taught anything like that. And what I want to show you is that in the Bible, Christ actually taught something of the opposite. So if you got a Bible with you, and I think if you don't, there's one in the pew in front of you, you can turn to Colossians chapter 3. Colossians chapter 3. The book of Colossians is all about how the one thing that we're supposed to be relying on is Christ. The church in Colossae was at the crossroads of lots of different religions and lots of different philosophies. You got the Eastern religions and philosophies coming in, and you got the Western Greek religions and philosophies coming in. You had the philosophy of asceticism. You had the philosophy of a sort of early version of Gnosticism, like hidden knowledge that only special people get to know about. But Paul's point over and over again in the letter is, you only need Christ. And you've already had Christ delivered to you, so don't listen to these other things. And here in chapter 3, he is addressing sort of those philosophies that lean on enjoy the physical world because that's really all that matters kind of thing. We call that carnality, or we call that hedonism, and he addresses it here in chapter 3. He says, if then, I probably have it on the, I have to point it somewhere. Maybe it's the down arrow. There it is. It's the down arrow. All right. So I'll read the few verses before this, but he says, if then you were raised with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ is sitting at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on things on the earth. For you died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. So when Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. And then we have the verse that is on the board. Therefore, put to death your members which are on the earth, fornication and uncleanness, passion, evil desires, covetousness, which is idolatry. Now, these things that he lists seem to be the things that people get into when they're trying to find themselves, when they're trying to go on some journey where they're just figuring out their life and figuring out their way on their own. It's sort of just human nature that we start to gravitate towards things that feel good, right? If you let a kid eat candy all day, they will eat candy all day. It doesn't matter if the candy is bad for them, and it doesn't matter how much it makes their stomach hurt. They'll keep eating candy all day. Why? It tastes good. It's sweet. And they're kids, right? And that's really what we are. We're just little kids. We're just little kids. And when we don't take into account that we need to be following God and following his instructions, then we're like kids who just have an unlimited supply of candy, and we will make ourselves hurt to the max just because it's so sweet. Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because that's going to come up in the sermon too. Tammy mentioned that Solomon in the book of Ecclesiastes, he has this time in his life where he says, I'm going to consider things apart from God, as if God is not part of the equation, and he's searching for a thing to make his life meaningful. And he tries all these things. He tries pleasurable things. He tries pursuing wisdom. He tries giving up on wisdom and just living life to the max. And at the end of it all, he says, all of that was not worth it. The only thing that makes it worth it is God. And so here we're told by Paul to put to death the ungodly, sinful parts of ourselves. A few verses after this, in verse 8, he says, but now you yourselves are to put off all of these: anger and wrath and malice and blasphemy and filthy language out of your mouth. We're not supposed to pursue the things that make us feel good just because they feel good. If those things are sinful, if they are carnal, fleshly, if they're earthly, and they don't honor God, then we're supposed to, in verse 8, he says we're supposed to put them off of us. And verse 5, he uses the even more graphic term, we're supposed to kill it. We're supposed to put it to death. If you have a King James version, it might say mortify. You're to mortify it. That means you're supposed to execute it. You know, how they in the French Revolution would put people on the chopping block and they would put them to death. We're supposed to cut those things out of our lives. Not harbor them and see if they make our lives meaningful. And so people these days, they fall into the trap where they pursue all these things in an effort to find meaning for their lives, without realizing that there is only one thing that fulfills that need. The old saying is, every human is made with a God-shaped hole in their heart. Or as the Ecclesiastes says, God has put eternity into the hearts of man. That every person has a need from the time they're born, and that need is only filled by a relationship with God. And so instead of being true to ourselves here in Colossians, Christ taught us, he called us to be changed. And instead of being true to ourselves, to be true to him. Because being true to ourselves has a flaw built into it, right? That if we're true to ourselves, what happens if we ourselves are not true to the truth? Right? If someone is copying down the text of a document, but that document is actually the copy of another document, the original, and that copy has an error in it, they're going to copy down the same error, right? So if our standard is something subjective like ourselves, then we have a problem. Because even if we try the very best that we can to be good, moral people, we are still human. And we still have our own biases. We still have our own misunderstandings of the truth. And so if we don't operate on the standard of God, the standard of Christ and his teachings, then we operate on a flawed standard. And being true to ourselves will just replicate the flaw. That's why Christ never taught people to just find themselves or be true to themselves. He taught people to find God. Be true to God. Be true to the truth. Our next passage is Matthew chapter 10. If you entered in, after we turned to Colossians, you can now turn to Matthew chapter 10. And in Matthew chapter 10, Jesus is talking to the apostles, and he's talking about sending them out to proclaim his coming. And he talks about the fact that, not everybody's going to like what they are teaching. Not everyone's going to like the gospel. And sometimes people are going to start persecuting the apostles because of what they are teaching. He even says that's probably going to happen often. But Jesus teaches the apostles that they should not be fearing these people who are going to be persecuting them. And they should not be making decisions based on what they think is best. Because if they do that, then they're going to start compromising so that these persecuting people don't hurt them, right? Like self-preservation instinct. So he says, starting in verse 27, he says, "Whatever I tell you in the dark, speak in the light. And what you hear in the ear, preach on the housetops." Basically saying, I've been teaching you guys privately, but now is the time that you're going to go out and you're going to be teaching it publicly. You're going to take what I've been telling you one-on-one, and you're going to proclaim it to the people. "And do not fear those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell." And he says, "Are not 2 sparrows sold for just a copper coin? And not one of them falls to the ground apart from your Father's will. But the very hairs on your head are numbered. So don't fear, therefore. You are more valuable than many sparrows." So leading up to verse 32, which is the one that we're actually going to be focusing on, he's saying, when push comes to shove, persecutions come because we're standing for the truth. It can be very tempting to compromise the truth because we have the instinct of self-preservation to protect ourselves. But he's saying there is something more important than that. There's something that goes beyond that scope of understanding, and it is the truth of the gospel. So don't be afraid of people who are going to persecute you. And then he says here in verse 32, he says, "Therefore, whoever confesses me before men, him I will also confess before my Father who is in heaven." And then he says, "But whoever denies me before men, him I will also deny before my Father who is in heaven." Jesus teaches that his followers must not just be willing to, but they must confess him before men if they are to expect him to confess them before God. If we have the instinct to protect ourselves and we let that urge override our commitment to the gospel, then what does Jesus say would happen? There in verse 33, if you're looking at it in your lap. What would happen then? He will deny them. If they are going to deny him, again, in this context, it's because they are afraid. It's not just that they're lazy. It's wrong to do that because you're lazy, but that's a different story. But it's because they're afraid. How understandable is it if someone does something because they're afraid? You know? If someone lashes out because they're afraid, the first thing that people are going to be saying is, they're just afraid. People do things because they're afraid all the time. I mean, recently people have been setting fires to cars because they're afraid. Because they're afraid of what's going to come, what the future holds. They're afraid for the economy. They're afraid for their rights. They're afraid. And that's an understandable feeling. But here in this instance, Jesus is telling them there's something that needs to override your fear. There's something that needs to override your idea of this is an understandable reason for me to compromise. And that is the gospel. That is the truth. We're never supposed to compromise the truth, even if it goes against things that we like, even if it goes against the idea of us being secure and protected. Now, of course, he backs that up by saying, look at the birds. They're sold for pennies, but God takes care of all of them. You are more important than birds. As much as the Alfred Hitchcock movie would disagree. You are more important than birds. So you don't have to be afraid. God, who values you more than them, he has you secured, and you don't need to worry. And so that should bolster our confidence for being true to Christ instead of just true to ourselves in this instance. But he says, whoever confesses me before men, him I will also confess before my Father who is in heaven. Any questions or comments on that? Any thoughts? Yeah, Jim. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hmm. Hmm. Sure, yeah. Yeah.
As I look at this passage, that kind of precedes this discussion
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
the discipleship precedes the discussion of the reward and then the turning away, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
in that context. There's kind of an expectation that this confession is going to come with, the expectation that the Lord will be in the life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you are going to be a disciple of Jesus, then that entails that you're going to try and be like him. You know, back in those days, a disciple was not just someone who like learns, I guess you could say, like the book knowledge, right? They're not just someone who learns how to do a thing from their teacher. They are a person who learns how to be like their teacher. So especially in Jesus' context, Jesus in the Bible, he's called a rabbi, which is the Jewish word for teacher, but it carries some connotations with it. Rabbis would basically recruit disciples, they would recruit students, and those students would live with their rabbi. They would live with them, they would learn from them, and they would learn to do things like how their rabbi does things.
I would think of one thing they do independently, and that is they have to decide to be a disciple.
Yes.
Because he gave them all the option,
Mhm.
all the things. And we see countless examples of people that didn't follow him.
That's true. That's very true.
They were invited, and they turned away and said, "No, my life outside of this is more important."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Another thing that comes up for me is, built on what Jim was talking about, is this idea of we're constantly like turning towards following God, and we're doing it imperfectly. And like for me, that is a reminder of humility and submission, of that like God wants me as I am, and I'm constantly turning towards God and trying to conform myself to Christ, and I am only complete in Christ. I'm never going to be enough
Mm-hmm.
by myself.
Yeah.
It's only in Christ that I am enough. And so like that's one piece of it. And then the other thing that was coming up for me is the idea that in the body there is diversity, there is different gifts. And so while we are all conforming, trying to conform towards the image of Christ, there is still diversity in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think there are two statements that the Bible makes, that the New Testament makes, that we need to, instead of taking just one or the other, we need to synergize them because the New Testament, the Bible, is to be taken as a whole. You're not supposed to take disparate parts and say, oh, this part is my philosophy. This part doesn't match, so I'm just going to, no. You're supposed to take it all as one. So in one place, you have the concept that Jesus tells people to come to him and then he will teach them, right? He says, come follow me, then I will give you rest. Then I will teach you, then you will learn from me. So you have that concept, like Tammy said, come as you are, just as I am. You know that song, right? Just as I am. So it's the concept that he wants you to come as you are. But, right, we can't take that as a license to continue on in sin as we were when we first came to him. Because the Bible says, come as you are. Christ is the friend of sinners. But it also says, be holy as I am holy. And in 2 Corinthians, Paul mentions that the way we are becoming more like Christ is, he says, by degree. A little bit at a time, right? So you have come as you are. Don't stay as you are. Be holy as I am holy, and that's a process. Bill.
Yeah, speaking to that idea of diversity, I think we see that even with what Jesus did with his disciples, because he recruited people who from very different walks of life.
Mm-hmm.
And you can look at the stark contrast between Peter and Paul. He used a fisherman who had a completely different skill set than a Jewish rabbi in training, if you will,
Yeah.
to reach out to the whole entire world, essentially. He took them, and then once they conformed to him, they decided to follow him. Then he used them and their skill sets to reach out to all the different types of people that they could reach out to
Yeah.
because of the differences that they have. But again, the differences they have united under the goal
Of Christ, yeah. Yeah, when the Bible talks about being conformed to the image of Christ, Jesus had a secular job. He was a carpenter, so, he builds things. But like Phil said, he recruited people who were from all different walks of life. And you could say different temperaments as well, because, you don't read about Bartholomew asking Jesus if he would like to destroy an entire town of people because they wouldn't listen to him. But you hear about John asking that. You don't hear about like Thaddeus cutting off a man's ear, but you do read about Peter doing that. So you have people who are of different temperaments as well. Yeah. But as far as like occupation goes and your skill sets, we vary, and I think that is intentional, as Paul says in 1 Corinthians 12. If the entire body was the eyes, then how would it hear? And if the entire body was the ears, how would it smell? Not like what it would smell like. How could it smell? The body of Christ is meant to have different kinds of people with different skill sets, not all conforming to one homogeneous, we all do this thing, but we all do different things and thus have the whole range of the calling of the church covered. Yeah, it's a good thought. But as far as I mentioned people of different temperaments, what I find amazing is that the New Testament has this sort of background story going on in it of the people. So like I said, you have John and his brother James who asked Jesus if he would want to call fire down to destroy these Samaritans in this town that wouldn't listen to him. But then later in 1 John, you have John writing about love one another. Love is from God, and the one who loves knows God. The one who doesn't love doesn't know God, because God is love. That's the same guy. That's the same guy who, 20-ish years ago was, if he had the power, would have just fried an entire town of people. And then you have Peter writing, it is good that we suffer on behalf of Christ, not as evildoers, but if we suffer for the sake of righteousness. And if we do that, the love of Christ is fulfilled in us. That's the same guy who, when it came down to it, he tried to kill a man. I don't think he was aiming for the man's ear. That's just my theory. I think he was trying to kill him. That's the same guy who 20 or 30 years ago tried to murder a man. And you have other guys like Simon, who is called Simon the Zealot. He's literally a terrorist, but he's one of the apostles. And when it came time for Jesus to send them out, he went out and he taught the gospel. He was one of the apostles, just like John, just like Peter, just like Paul. And you have Paul, right, who brought men and women in chains before the high priest and before the council and voted yes when the vote was cast whether or not they were to be put to death. And then he goes out and he teaches people of the love of Christ and the grace of God. The temperaments, you start in one place and you're definitely supposed to get to another place, a higher place. Yeah. You come as you are, but you don't stay as you are. And that definitely goes along with what we're talking about. That's definitely something that we need to make clear when we are teaching people the gospel. You don't have to be perfect to come and have redemption in Christ, but you do need to go into it understanding that the aim is not to stay sinful, but is to improve bit by bit. and pursue the image of Christ. So now we are going on to now the book of Luke. Luke chapter 9. Jesus says this famous phrase here. He says, "If anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me." We are a long amount of time separated from the days that they would use a cross as a means of executing people. So we don't really have as graphic a connection with it as they did back then. But, take up your electric chair daily. This is not just you saying, I'm going to deny my fleshly desires. This is you saying, I'm going to consider myself dead. It's not me. It's not about me. As Paul said, I've been crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live, and not I, but Christ who lives in me. It's not me anymore. It's Christ living in me. The life that I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God. I'm still alive in this flesh, right? This is still me living and breathing and walking around. But in a different sense, it's not me. I'm not living for my desires. I'm not living for the things that I want. I'm living for the things that Christ wants. Christ never taught anybody to go out and find themselves. He taught people to deny themselves and to take up their cross daily, to take up this mentality of my wants, my desires, my aims, they've been put down. They've been put to death. They've been crucified along with Christ, and so I follow after him. And of course, that idea of taking up your cross, I've got something in my eye. Sorry. That idea of taking up your cross means that you are going to be unashamed of Christ. I think that also plays into the last thing that we saw here when he says, whoever confesses me before men, I'll confess him before my Father in heaven. But whoever denies me before men, I'll deny him before my Father in heaven. There's an idea of you needing to be unashamed of Christ. The cross was a thing of shame in the ancient world, in the Roman world, that is. It was a thing of shame. It was a punishment reserved not for petty thieves or anything like that. It was a punishment reserved for enemies of the state. The worst of criminals in the Roman world. It was reserved for those kinds of people. It was a thing of public embarrassment. I mean, usually when Jesus' crucifixion is depicted in some kind of artwork, he has at least some clothes on. That's not how they did it. He was stripped bare. And he was beaten and disfigured beyond recognition, and then hung up on a cross for everybody to see. It was a thing of shame. It was a thing of embarrassment. And this is the thing that Christ said, you must take up daily and follow after me. There's this sense that we must be unashamed of Christ whom we follow. We need to be unashamed of the fact that he expects things of us that are against the expectations of the world. I'm sure you have encountered at least once. If someone learns that you are a Christian, they'll say, so you're a Christian. Is it true that Jesus taught XYZ? Is it true that Jesus taught that it is a sin to be homosexual? what do you think that person is really trying to get at with that question? Right? Oh, you Christians, you're so backwards in your thinking. You're judgmental, you're intolerant, be unashamed of Christ. I taught this to teenagers. If someone comes at you with a question like this, rule number 1, never mince what the Bible says to make it more palatable. Ever. Because it's the truth. And the truth is the truth. And number 2, don't be judgmental of them for the reason why they're asking the question. Because that's just the way the world works. They're in the world, they're of the world. That's just the way that their mind is going to work. Yeah.
That statement kind of brings full circle to your original what people try to find themselves outside of the biblical construct. We have faith.
Mhm.
Everybody believes something. Ultimately, we have a world that believes that the Bible is not correct.
Mm.
It's their choice. Like, it is, and this is not sound, this is going to sound okay. It is a free country.
Mhm. Yeah.
And people can make those choices. The Romans 1 challenge to me is not whether or not we believe in God is what we do about it.
Mm.
And ultimately, that last statement of what we do with God and where that leads us or doesn't lead us, those that choose not to believe in God, that last step, it's not just homosexuality, it's all forms of
Mhm.
pleasure-seeking at all costs. And it is on both sides, it's the navel-gazing and it's the narcissism, it's both sides where people are trying to find themselves
Mhm.
instead of trying to find God.
Yeah. It's the old thing, as old as time, people trying to fulfill their desires without God. It's that thing that the serpent presented to Adam and Eve. He presented it to Eve. But it's the thing that the serpent presented to Eve. You should eat this fruit. It'll open your eyes, and you'll be like God without having to rely on him. Tale as old as time. Yes?
It's also not just the matter of the truth, it's also how we present it.
Oh, yeah.
Because you get that kind of negative questioning, so to speak, from people. And I think some of that, not all of it, obviously, some people are just trying to catch your word. Some of that is they are used to such a bad response to the question. For example, Jesus in one caught in adultery, they bring him to one caught in adultery,
Mm-hmm.
and they say, she's caught, what do you want to do? Here's what the law says. And, he deals with it, and he tells her, go your way and sin no more. He doesn't run her up and down. He doesn't have her stoned. He says, here's the problem. You know what you did. Don't do it anymore. It's also how we address the situation.
Yeah.
Response
Yeah.
is important.
Yeah. The book of Ephesians, Paul says, speak the truth in love, right? Don't speak the truth in hate. Don't speak the truth in disgust, but speak the truth in love. People of the world are going to be worldly. It should never come as a surprise. You should fully expect it. And so when you encounter it, speak the truth in love. Oh, yeah, no. Yeah. Like Jim said, it's a free country. That's something I also teach to the teenagers at West Broward. You can give the absolute best, rock-solid, airtight case for the Bible, for Christ, for the gospel, and people can still choose to not believe it because they don't want to. That's just how it works. We are humans. We all have free will. We can just choose not to believe something. Or we can choose to believe something. We can choose to believe lies that don't have any support to them. Or we can choose to not believe the most evidence-based claims in the whole world. We can just choose it. That's how humans work. Yeah.
The challenge for us is not what happens outside of boldness to be humble. And that those seemingly are contradictory, but when I can recognize within myself, it speaks larger volumes to those outside, because they see it, people outside. They see my inadequacies.
Yeah.
Hopefully less than I get 18, 20 years ago. But when I can say, I'm not perfect, God is, I'm still attempting to become a little bit more like that through the Spirit. I personally am convinced that it speaks volumes. Not that I'm bringing to them the truth that they should believe, but that my life represents them.
Yeah. Yeah. The Christian who lives out their faith beyond Sunday is the strongest testament to the gospel. I'm not one to just repeat platitudes or anything like that, but I read it this morning. I thought it was just crazy that it came across on my phone. But the adversary is not afraid of Sunday morning Christians. The adversary is afraid of Christians who will live out their Christianity Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and throughout the whole week, throughout all of their days, not just when they're in church. We have to go about our lives in general with the understanding that our being a disciple of Christ is not just when we're gathered together as Christ's disciples. It's when we're out there in the world and we're showing people what Christ is supposed to look like. And we're going to slip up, we're going to make mistakes, we're not going to do it perfect every time. That's kind of just because we're still in the world, in these bodies, instead of our spiritual renewed bodies that we will receive at the resurrection. Yes? You must learn what is love and how to give it. That's right. Yeah, yeah. And people are more willing to actually listen to you, aren't they? People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Again, I'm not one to just repeat platitudes, but that one seems pretty apt. But yeah, you need to learn what love is, and you need to learn how to give it. Love is kind. Love does not boast, and love is not crude. Love does no harm, and love believes all things, and love bears all things. Love endures all things, and love hopes all things.
The test I constantly do when I think about, do I love that person I'm dealing with, especially within the church, is I always think of my children. They disappoint me often. I disappoint them too. They frustrate me. But I love them so much. You know, I want to do anything possible for them. And even when they treat me badly or we have all kinds of conflict between us, I don't stop loving them. And I sometimes think, that's not how we treat our brothers and sisters in Christ sometimes, because we're just like, okay, they're just dead to me. We're in the same building together, but we're not going to have a relationship anymore. Or I'm never going to build a relationship from the first step. And, you know,
Mhm.
To anybody you encounter. But, you know, we can't feel our own children are more special than anybody else that God loves and cares about as Christians. We've got to create that type of love for people that aren't physically related to us.
Yeah.
People that just are human. Christ loves them, and we have a mission to love them the way Christ loves them.
That's right.
And that's hard.
That's right. Yeah. Because we only have so much energy, I guess you could say. We only have so much in our tank in one day. That can be hard. Yeah. Another thing that I recently saw was someone mentioned having kids is like a crash course in theology. Like John said, you love them to death, but man, can they disappoint you, and man, can they make you mad. But you still love them. But you still love them. You know, we probably disappoint God on a daily basis. But God still loves us. Yeah. I have no idea what time I'm supposed to stop talking at. Right now? Excellent. Thank you so much.